point, just as a heads up. So with that being said, the overview of the MIST program is as follows. This is a program that, as you can kind of guess, we're really focused on the usage of education technology in a variety of training and education contexts. Now, the beauty of this program, and I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go, but I like to get it out right at the front that this is not a master's of education degree. This is a master's of science in instructional science and technology, and really truly instructional design. And because of that, we have faculty members who truly have expertise in a variety of disciplines. We have folks who have worked as school teachers. We have folks who've worked in higher education contexts. We have folks who've worked in nonprofit or for-profit education settings, and also those who've worked in corporate and government settings that focus more on training from a more corporate standpoint. So the beauty of that is that the instruction technology that we're ultimately teaching is technology that can be used in a variety of contexts. And that also means that you'll end up having students in this program from a variety of contexts. So it creates a much more rich learning environment, in my opinion, because ultimately you can not only learn how to use instructional technology in a variety of ways, in a variety of settings, but your peers will also be able to help inform your understanding of the technology in their own settings, and you can learn in that kind of unique way, okay? Now, the beauty of this program, another really unique thing about it is that it's looking at education technology, not just in a distance setting. So many programs nowadays that are either ed tech programs or instructional design programs focus very heavily on just distance education or online learning. And this program focuses on how we can use technology in person as well. So technology that you can use in a classroom, or technology that you could use kind of on the fly with a group of student learners that you're doing a more interactive type of learning, or a learning where you're going around in different locations in a building, so on and so forth. The variety of type of technologies that you'll learn are really unique because of that focus on just purely educational, kind of strict educational environments, okay? So with that said, what also do we end up teaching our folks to do? Now, if you've heard of the ADDIE model of design, this is a way that we can contextualize the way that we create either educational programs or learning modules, so on and so forth. And in this program, at least in that style of program, you do a variety of things. The first is you learn how to plan effective instruction. Kind of what do the learners need to know? And this is as simple as sometimes doing a needs analysis, or just surveying folks within your organization so that if there's certain learner needs, you know them well in advance of what you're creating. Then ultimately you learn skills to create effective design elements to the things that you're ultimately creating for students to learn. So this could be designing a module, could be designing a website, could be designing instructional videos, it could be designing an in-person training. It could be so many different things, but you ultimately learn the design skills to create the type of educational or training material that you need to use that can be most effective for the learners that you're working with. Naturally, another big component of this is the development phase. So you'll actually get to learn different forms of technologies, from Camtasia to Adobe Captivate, to a variety of video and audio software that can help you to create tools and learning programs that are very modern and naturally are technologies that are used in this field all the time. But they're also great in terms of creating scenario-based learning or game-based learning, things that are very much so kind of in the now in our field, if you will. And then naturally, we'll learn how to implement those things so that you're able to take what you're designing and you're developing so that you can implement them either in an online setting, such as using a course learning management system like Canvas, or creating your own website to host these materials. And then the other key component is also the evaluation side of the house, which is evaluating the instructional programs. Something I talk about in every open house. And this is one of those things where students kind of either totally agree with me, or they're kind of like, yeah, I never thought about that before. It's this idea of making sure that what we're creating is actually effective. We could teach you to do all sorts of really cool things with technology, but if they're not actually making learning happen and making that learning that's happening effective, then it's kind of the chicken or egg type question of, do we really need to do these types of things if there's a better approach? And this way, you know what you ultimately need to create and what technologies you can leverage to create said things, okay? The other great thing about our program is that we focus very heavily on this idea of project management and looking at how we can assume leadership roles as either an instructional technologist, an ed specialist, instructional designer, corporate trainers, or as teachers. A lot of people will leverage this degree in a role that they already have. So while we do look at a lot of things from an instructional design context, this degree is pretty multimodal and could be spread out to a variety of fields because of that. Okay. So what's special about our program? And one of the things that I actually tell students a lot who are either applying to our program or call me or email me with inquiries about the program is that there are a lot of instructional design programs out there, and there are a lot of education technology programs as well. And they all have their own little unique bent to them. But the thing that makes us relatively unique in this particular field is firstly that our degree is offered in the School of Computing and Design. So naturally, the beauty of that is that you get to learn more from a technology, kind of an application of technology standpoint. And this also, I will admit, sometimes scares folks and they think, uh-oh, I need to have some type of programming or coding knowledge. And that couldn't be further from the case. At the end of the day, we teach every technology that you would use in this program from the ground up. So all that we ask of students is that if they're able to basically jump on a Zoom call or they're able to use a computer, they're ready to go for our program in terms of the foundational skills. But the beauty of being in the School of Computing and Design is you can then take this degree really as far as you want to from a technology standpoint. If you're somebody who really wants to create really rich kind of technology infused learning, this is the type of program that would be for you, okay? The other great thing about our program is that we have ways to do this, in my opinion, that work for both full-time working professionals and more traditional students. The beauty, if you're a full-time working professional, our degree was designed with that in mind. So everything that you're doing in the program, all of the assignments, you can kind of notate and work through them based in the context that you're currently working in. And so it ends up being a vis-a-vis type thing where you have your education informing the work that you're doing and the work that you're doing informing the ways that you work your way through this degree. So we really, really do love students having a full-time job, and the workload is doable based on the way that we've structured the curriculum. But if you're a traditional student, this program can also work quite well for you. When I went through the program as a student, I was a traditional student who had just finished his bachelor's degree, heard about this field, thought it was really interesting, and took this program as a full-time student, and then use that to leverage that into a career during the second half of the program. So it will work for either type of learner, but I don't want full-time employed professionals to be dissuaded from taking this program because we do have you in mind when we created it. Okay. So I want to give you a quick overview of what the program looks like from some of the more logistical items. This is a relatively quick program. It's a 4-semester program. You would start in the fall, and excuse my date typos here, but this should read August of 2023 is the cohort that we're recruiting for. And that 2023 cohort would finish in December of 2024. So that would take roughly about 16 months to complete. Now, the mode of study is up to the learner. We have 2 tracks. We have an online program, and I should say that is a fully online program, and we have a more hybrid style of learning where you would have some work on campus and some work online. Regardless of which modality you choose, both follow very similar structures. They both have a 16-week-long semester. The blended program or the hybrid program has synchronous sessions that require some face-to-face time on campus, and the online program is done all online. In either case of that modality, you would be doing these sessions synchronously at the beginning and end of each semester. So if you're in the online program, your orientations and coursework would still have some live face-to-face time, but by and large, it would be asynchronous in nature, okay? Now, for both programs, they have a combination of 4-unit core classes, and I'll go over what that curriculum looks like in a moment. And then 2-unit support or elective courses to enrich the learning that's taking place. Regardless of program, this is a 36-unit pathway to complete your master's degree. And the tuition is also equivalent for both programs. And it's roughly, when we look at tuition, software, books, it ends up being roughly around $18,000 for the entirety of the program. Okay. And then the starting date, as I alluded to before, would be end of August of 2023, with our final application deadline being May 31st. And I'll talk about some of the admission items later. Okay. So in terms of the program curriculum, and I should also say, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You can always, send me a chat message and I'll try to address your question as you go, okay? So the first kind of semester here, we have 4 classes that you could ultimately end up taking. The first would be the instructional technology class, which is a relatively broad survey of the forms of instructional technology that are common in kind of today's more robust education technology learning environments, or at least the types of education technology that we could use in more modern learning environments. That's paired with our instructional design course, which gives you the schema by which to design instructional units, okay? So a big component of what you're learning is not only how to use technology, but how to use that technology in an educational manner that actually helps learners to learn. Another big component of this is the overall learning of how to design out a module from a planning perspective. So we teach you how to storyboard a learning unit. We teach you what's known as an instructional design document, where you map out what the learner needs and what you're going to use to meet that learner's needs, and the types of context that you see yourself teaching or training in, so that you're not just really kind of playing around with technology, you're using technology well. These are paired with a couple of support classes. We have a writing workshop class, which is essentially like an APA skill set type class that brings all of you up to a graduate level in terms of a writing context. And then we also have a technology workshop where, as I alluded to before, this helps you have all of the skill sets you would need to learn maybe some of the more robust technology as we work through the program. So in this class, you learn how to create a course in Canvas. You learn how to use a file transfer protocol client to get things up and off of the internet, download or upload things to the internet, okay? In terms of the server practice. Then you learn some light web design skills. You learn some very light audio and visual production skills. Super basic stuff that's relatively quick and easy to learn. And these are little weekly modules that you complete so that you have plenty of skill sets in place to be able to use some of the more robust technology that you would learn in the spring. And so in the spring, this would be a combination of courses, the learning theory class, where you ultimately learn about a variety of different modern learning theories that can inform your capstone. And so I'll take a quick kind of brief detour here to describe the capstone. In our program, we offer 2 types of capstones. We offer a research capstone for those who want to write a more traditional master's thesis through which they could use to apply to a doctorate program, a PhD or an EDD. Or you can do a project-based capstone. And the project-based capstone is just as it sounds. You're creating an hour-long learning module, which might sound relatively short, but to create a really high-level, deeply interactive learning module, to do an hour of instruction takes quite a bit of work. And so you ultimately can pick that pathway as well. Regardless of which pathway you pick, you're going to use a learning theory as kind of the underpinning foundation of why you're doing what you're doing. So if you're, for example, if you're using a project-based capstone and you're working with primarily adult learners, you might use adult learning theory to underpin that particular project. This class is paired with interactive multimedia, which essentially teaches one of 2 key software. You can pick between either learning Adobe Captivate, which is a modern e-learning software. In a lot of ways, the way I like to describe it is it could be as simple as creating a very robust kind of crazy PowerPoint. That's what Adobe Captivate can feel like. But Adobe Captivate can also go so far as creating mini kind of learning games. It can create branched-based, scenario-based learning, so on and so forth. Almost any online training you've taken has probably been created in Adobe Captivate. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Let me ask my daughter really quickly to turn off her tab. Okay. So they're very unique softwares that you end up learning. These e-learning software, they're really kind of the most robust pieces of technology we teach in the program. And to cross compare that, we also offer the ability to learn about Articulate Storyline. It's very similar to Adobe Captivate. The primary differences to me is that Adobe Captivate is kind of like the sports car of the e-learning software industry. It gives you a variety of different things that you can do, and it can feel kind of confusing at first to learn, but we break the software down into weekly modules. Whereas, yes. Sorry, my daughter was asking if she could do her homework. So that gives you kind of a variety of things you can do with Adobe Captivate, probably far more than most people need, to be quite frank. Articulate Storyline has less functionality, in my opinion, but it's really great for younger learners. And so if you're somebody who teaches in a K-12 context, or you're somebody who works in a nonprofit role where you have a lot of younger learners, Articulate Storyline is a little bit easier to use right out of the gate, but it doesn't have quite all of the functionalities that Adobe Captivate has, in my opinion. Some would disagree, but it's a little bit easier, I suppose, for younger learners to pick up right away. So in any case, you'd be picking one of those two pieces of software and really mastering it to a professional level through individual weekly modules that teach you key components of those softwares so that you can ultimately make use of all of their features at a very high level. Okay. In this particular semester, let's see if it's going to pop up for me here. Let me just put all of them up so it'll be a little bit easier if I show it. In this particular semester, there's also a couple of elective choices. There's an audio and video production class that focuses on the use of tools such as Camtasia and TechSmith. And these are relatively simple pieces of technology to learn how to use, but they help you to create high-level audio and visual skills and products that you can use within Adobe Captivate. One of the great things about Adobe Captivate, if you've done an online learning module before, is that a lot of it has functionality that requires video or audio components to it. And the cool thing about that is it's just a unique way to interact with a computer to learn. The beauty of this class is it teaches you how to create really crisp audio and video so that you're maximizing the design components that Adobe Captivate allows you to do. So once again, pretty simple class. It sounds probably more kind of intense than it is, but the skills that it teaches you in such a short time frame allows you to maximize what you would be doing in interactive multimedia, that particular class. If you're someone who's writing a research thesis, you're taking that kind of research-based capstone, then there is a research methods class that teaches you both quantitative and qualitative research skills. Some folks who are not writing a thesis still take this class because those overall kind of survey skills and research skills can really benefit somebody who's taking a module and trying to use a lot of surveys in them to get out key data from their learners. So that can still be a really useful class for students who are not writing a research thesis. In the summer, we have two classes. We have an assessment and evaluation class, which is just as it sounds. It focuses on looking at ways that we can assess learners to see that learning is taking place, and also perform evaluations to make sure that the learning modules that we're creating are actually helping people to learn. And so we focus a lot on tools that you can use so that you can perform what's known as a formative evaluation, where you're kind of pre-planning a module, and also as you're creating it, you're redesigning components of it, and then also summative evaluation, so that as you're creating learning modules or learning activities, you can ultimately see if learning took place from start to finish and then make changes because of that evaluation process. So really important skill sets to me, regardless if you're someone who teaches in a traditional teaching environment, or you do more of a type of training or corporate trainings. These are tools that you absolutely need to be able to maximize. And a lot of this we do just simply through Excel. So it's not terribly difficult to learn how to do, but they're good skill sets to have nonetheless. This is paired with what's probably the most popular class in our program, the Advanced Instructional Design class, where you ultimately work with a team of students to create a short module, about a 10 to 15 minute training module for a partner organization of ours, that some of which are folks on our campus, different departments on our campus. There's also other institutions of higher education who paired with us. The Department of Defense has partnered with us, National Library of Congress, Fortune 500 companies. Really, we've had quite a few different partners here. And the beauty of it is you're ultimately going to do a project for somebody outside of CSUMB or at least an external department on campus, so that you're getting some key feedback about the previous skills and technologies that you've learned in the program. These are folks who are professionals in this field. So they'll be able to give you some very robust feedback so you can kind of know where to take the next steps in what you're learning, okay? This is one of those classes that it's kind of an intense experience, but it's a lot of fun. And it's really a unique opportunity that unfortunately not a lot of programs make use of, is this type of this is almost like an internship, if you will, in instructional design. Okay. Now in the fall, we have a combination of two things. You're going to pick from one of the two electives below or both, which is either an HTML5 JavaScript web design class where you would learn how to create a website through which to host learning materials. So this way you can host instructional videos, you can host a module you create in Adobe Captivate or a training you create in Adobe Captivate onto a website, so that if you don't have a course management system like Canvas or Moodle or so on and so forth, this way you at least have a place where you can house these materials so that the learner can access them. If you don't need those particular skill sets, you could take instead a project management class, which is very much so focused on project management from an instructional design and an education technology standpoint. So it's looking at how we can lead teams of other educators or lead teams of other corporate trainers so that we're creating cohesive learning modules and cohesive learning units or classes for that matter, that ultimately are as effective for the context of learners that you work with as humanly possible. Okay, a lot of folks end up taking both of those because they're such unique electives. It's hard to not kind of take both of them. Okay, now the capstone is also an opportunity to wrap up the program and to do one of those two capstones that we talked to before. The only other component to this that I haven't really talked about is that for both programs, regardless of if you're online or blended, there's these seminars that start off the program. So these little thought bubbles are showing when they happen. So at the start of the semester, if you were in the blended program, you would actually spend a 3-day weekend on campus in the classroom learning about these particular topics, okay? And so on and so forth. You would do that each and every semester. If you were online, the only difference would be that you would be doing these via Zoom, just as if you were doing this right now. Now, the other component to this is that what they end up doing is they have a mixture of components. There's coursework in here. There's actual learning taking place about the content that is taught in these classes. But the other component as you get through the program is a lot of them are review or key presentations of the work that you're doing. And in other cases, we actually have industry professionals and kind of additional training, if you will, of skill sets that we don't necessarily teach in the program, but are worth knowing, if you will. So for example, this particular semester, we offered an additional kind of opportunity to learn about accessible learning environments, how we can create online learning materials that anyone could make use of, even if they have potentially a learning disability or something of that nature. Okay, so a really unique opportunity to look how we can use technology for every learner. Okay, so that's just an example of the types of things that you would do. So you would have 4 of these that meet coursework objectives, and one of which where you would present your final capstone upon completion of the program. Okay, so that's ultimately what the program looks like from an educational standpoint. And just to give you some broader strokes of the key curricular outcomes, in the first semester, we focus on developing a common understanding of what instructional design means, and then building a familiarity with the processes that we use in this field to create really good educational programs, okay? In the second semester, we look at how learning theories can inform strong instructional design principles to construct as great of a functional learning unit as we possibly can. So you get to learn how to create little modules in either Adobe Captivate or Articulate Storyline so that you're making use of the technology that you're going to learn in this program. In the third semester, this is where you're doing a variety of usability, reliability, and efficiency tests to really make sure that the learning modules that you're creating for both your capstone and just as part of your coursework are as effective as humanly possible. And then in that final fall semester, you finish a capstone project or thesis that connects with your career as the culminating experience. It takes all of the coursework that you've been doing and it puts it all into one cohesive package. The only thing I would add, just to go back really quickly, is that in each of these classes, you're doing a component of your capstone. So you identify a capstone at the start of the program, pretty much, within a couple of weeks of starting it, you'll have a capstone in mind, and then you'll work on little pieces of the capstone each semester until you complete the program, okay? And you're not necessarily married to it. If you need to change ideas or you need to make at least a relatively substantive revision to the capstone to make it do something different, that's absolutely fine. Happens all the time, not a problem. Okay, and then just to add, really, I've given you kind of at least a teaser or kind of a taste of the software that you would learn in this program. There are other interactive multimedia software in infotech and media for that matter that you would learn through a variety of team-based and individual projects. So the beauty of this program is that really you don't need to be like an engineer to use this program. That's not really who we're targeting with this program. We're targeting folks who are either educators or trainers and can use technologies in novel ways to better inform those environments and teach with. Okay. All right. So typical week for a MIST student, this is a really common question, which is like, how much of a workload does this program have? And every graduate program is going to be a little bit different. Because this is a program that has a lot of time where you're working kind of asynchronously or synchronously on the internet, because really even the blended program is a primarily online program, whereas the fully online program naturally is a fully online program. Both of them are primarily online. And because of that, that means that you have a lot of work that you're doing kind of away from your professors, if you will. So we follow a Wednesday through Tuesday format, and why that's the case, I have no idea, but that's just ultimately, the program has been like that even since I was a student. So Wednesday is essentially our Monday. And on Wednesday, that's when the new module opens up. And I highly recommend for students that they carefully study requirements, they do some of the reading that needs to be taken place. And then on Thursday, they take those readings and they start to perform some discussions online. A really common question I get is these kind of those discussion forums where you answer a question, then you walk away, you don't actually discuss anything. Not at all. In our program, the discussion forums are meant to be highly interactive. It requires quite a bit of conversing with your peers. And so because of that, that's why I recommend starting your discussion forums early on a Thursday so that you can have reiterative conversations throughout the week with your peers. Now on Friday, this was generally when I would start my assignments. I would finish any reading that I have and I would ask questions of our faculty. Our faculty are really good folks. I'm sure everybody speaks highly of the faculty that they work for. But in our case, given the fact that I was their student at one point, I can speak from personal experience that these are folks that really enjoy interacting with students. And so you asking them questions is far from bothering them. It's a very collegial environment. We view this as we're all peers here. We're all folks who are trying to learn how to utilize technology in unique ways. And so you might come up with something really cool that the rest of your peers would want to know. And so if you're asking questions of your faculty, we can then update the curriculum in real time so that it's as beneficial for everybody that's learning as possible. So that asking questions component is so important to us, and it really does benefit everybody in the program. Now, on Saturday, this was my big work day. I would generally kind of view this as the day I was going to try to get most things done. So I would work on assignments and activities for most of the day. I would try to take Sunday completely off. And then Monday and Tuesday, that was essentially the last 2 days of that week. So I would focus on finalizing assignments each day, wrap up any discussions that I was having with my peers, and then submit my assignments and prepare for the upcoming module. In some classes, our professors kind of keep the module hidden week from week. Others will keep it open for the entirety of the class, but it will require prerequisites for you to move forward from module to module. In any case, you'll know what you're doing a little bit before you even start to do it. And that way you're prepared week by week so that nothing comes as a shock to you. Okay. Now, another really fair question that we get very, very commonly are kind of what can I use this degree for? And there, I would start this by saying that final bullet is really important. There's a lot of folks that, quite frankly, they're happy with what they're currently doing, and they just view this degree as a way that they can either be better teachers or they can apply it to their current position and be able to do the work that they're doing in new and novel ways. That's absolutely fantastic. There are other folks, whether they're K through 12 teachers, whether they're those who work in higher education, and whether they're those who work as corporate trainers who are looking to make a transition, or they're working in a corporate environment and they want to enter into the training field, so on and so forth. That's very common as well. The beauty of our program is because you're learning about education technology, there's a variety of jobs in that field you would be more than adequately prepared for. Because it teaches instructional design processes, you'd be very well suited to enter the field of instructional design, which is growing by the day, and or training, which is essentially the same thing. And then lastly, kind of this newer kind of fancy term of human performance technology fields are also on the table. And this is really looking at ways that we can create new learning experiences that are very novel in nature. So the types of jobs, these are the most common based on a survey that I ran last year with the graduates of our program, the vast majority of which were either working as instructional designers or became instructional designers upon completion of the degree. So these are the folks who quite literally will create online or in-person learning and training. These are not necessarily subject matter experts. So let's say you work at a university. In our university, we have an entire team that works at the Center of Academic Technology that quite literally helps professors take the content that they have and create online learning modules or create interactive modules that they can use in the classroom with their students. Helps them leverage new education technologies so that they can update the materials that they have in their class. These are the folks that are well-versed not only in the technology, but they're also well-versed in how to use the technology in a way that promotes new and engaging forms of learning, okay? Then there's corporate trainers, which are essentially the same thing, but they're doing it more in a corporate environment. A very common kind of newer job that I'm seeing is this learning experience manager position. And this is somebody who's overseeing a team of instructional designers, or they're overseeing a team of corporate trainers, and they're developing kind of either a program level or a corporate kind of wider company model by which training takes place. And so this is becoming very common. So for example, the person who oversees all of the training at Apple is a MIST graduate. She completed our program, I believe, about a year before I did. And so now she oversees all training of all of the internal trainings that are created at Apple. She oversees that team, okay? So that would be ultimately her type of role, all right? For those who work in a K-12 context, a lot of those folks will go from being strict teachers to becoming kind of a director of STEM at their particular school district or a director of education technology. And as I said before, there's plenty of folks who apply this to where they're currently working. Now, in terms of some of the admissions components, there's a few things to keep in mind here. First and foremost, the most important thing is obviously the application deadline. May 31st of next year is when our program application closes. I should add that our program does have a priority application date. So for those who are really interested in our program, we do recommend that they apply by December 15th. And the sole reason being is that priority deadline, we view those applicants independent of anybody who applies after that date. So if you apply by December 15th, we solely review you all based on the merits of the requirements of our program, not as I guess this is one way of putting it, in less of a competitive structure. So most of the applications that we get are usually around May 31st or late May. So if you apply earlier, the benefit is that if you meet the program requirements for admission and you put forth a good application, we will admit you and give you a seat before other people are reviewed. Okay, so that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. For this particular year, this was a question in my last open house that I had, was how many people are we admitting? We are not taking more than 25 students this year. We're trying to keep our programs a little bit more tight and compact. So it will be 25 total students, regardless of if you pick a fully online or a blended pathway. We're just taking 25 overall students. And so far, we've admitted about 5 students who've applied during this priority window. So there's about 20 seats left in our program at this time, which is pretty typical at this time of year. Okay, in terms of the application requirements, what does it entail? The first would be completing the online application at Cal State Apply, calstate.edu/apply, I should say. I have a video on our website that shows you how to walk through this process. Really, it's a super simple application process. Probably shouldn't take more than 20 to 30 minutes. But on that particular application, you get to what's known as the final quadrant of the application, or the documents quadrant of the application. On there, that's where you would upload a copy of either your official or unofficial college transcripts. We do recommend that you get a couple of copies of your official college transcripts, either one to submit with your application, but definitely one that you would send here to the university. That is a requirement for admission. On the application itself, you will upload a statement of purpose. And in the statement of purpose, which should be around 1,000 words or so, we ask that students detail a couple of things. One, what they kind of view the MIST program doing for their career, i.e. how would you utilize the degree? And secondly, kind of what you're hoping to learn from the program. And the reason why we ask students to focus on those items specifically is our admissions process is one that's set solely by what the CSU system in really the chancellor's office in Long Beach tells us to do. And so we have to consider any student who has at least a 2.5 or higher cumulative GPA and that fulfill all of the requirements found this application. As such, we're not really interested in making this a difficult process for admission. Instead, we just want to see that you can benefit from this program. So really the number one reason students aren't admitted, it's not their GPA, it's not their test scores or letters of recommendation. It's almost always because we feel like the degree would not benefit you. We don't want you to spend the money and your time if the degree is not going to be of benefit to you. Now, I will say, if your statement of purpose raises some red flags, generally speaking, we'll invite you to do an interview with either myself or the director of our program, Dr. Sue, to go over your statement of purpose and just make sure that maybe we misunderstood your intentions of the statement of purpose, or you can clear up some of the inconsistencies that we're seeing. So this is meant to be a very collegial process. We're not looking at this as if it's a us versus them type of dynamic, which unfortunately some graduate programs do act that way. Also include on your application, you'd be looking at 2 letters of recommendation. These can be from colleagues, these could be from supervisors, or it could be from potentially professors that you had in your past. We do ask that they try to be either professional or academic in nature, because naturally, if they're more like kind of familial or more personal type relationship letters of recommendation, that's not going to give us a good insight into either the type of professional you are, where we could get an understanding of how our degree could benefit you, or it won't give us an idea of what type of student you are, so that we know that you kind of have the ability to study in our program well. Okay, so that's for the letters of recommendation. We expect them to be glowing. That's pretty common for a letter of recommendation. So I will admit their weight is probably not as high as other components of the application, but they are still helpful for us to get an idea of what they're like. If your recommender is having issues knowing what to write about, we also have a recommendation form they can complete. So feel free to email me and I can send you that recommendation form. And then that gives them an ability to rate you on a 1 to 5 Likert scale of basically essential skill sets that we have in the program, or on the capabilities of you to meet those skill sets of our program if these are new things for you. Okay. Now, the only other item, if you're somebody who's completed your degree from outside of the United States, you do, as a requirement per the CSU policies, you have to do 2 additional things. You firstly have to perform some test of English proficiency if you haven't lived in the United States for roughly 5 years or more. So most people do that through a TOEFL score or through a Duolingo online test score. Those are both options. And then a foreign credit evaluation would also need to take place through some type of NACES accredited institution. So this is most commonly done through World Education Services, which is known as WES, where they'll take your transcripts from a foreign university and they'll look at it and they'll do a 1-to-1 comparison of what those classes would be equivalent to in a US university. And those are non-negotiable items for our students with documents from outside of the United States. Okay. So I believe at this point, that's everything that I have. If you have questions about the program, you have questions about the application, you can always email me at mist@csumb.edu. That goes to my email account. Our website is always a little in flux, but it's relatively up to date these days. So this also has more details about the classes. And then my office number is here should you want to have a more in-depth question, a question and answer period one-to-one. But the floor is open. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions from anybody at this time, if there are any. And if not, that's okay too. Yeah, Catherine, go ahead.
Hi. I just had a couple questions. Sorry, my mouse isn't working right now.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
The synchronous, the hybrid program, what is kind of the schedule for that?
Yeah, good question. So essentially the schedule is as follows. Let me go back, excuse me, let me go back over here. I'm going to quickly reshare this just to try to give you this in as least of confusing of a manner as possible. Essentially, if we were to go back and look at these classes, the hybrid model is as follows. Each of these thought bubbles, you would be like August, this term one semester would be August of 2023. So that would be about the third, fourth week of August. That weekend, you would have 3 days on campus. That would be the only time required on campus for the fall semester. Then in the spring semester, you'd have 2 days in January, and that would be the third weekend of January. And that would have 2 days on campus, and that would also be the only time required on campus. The summer would also be 2 days. That would be roughly in May, late May, early June. And then the fall would be another 2 days. And then that would also be in late August, just like the first semester was. And then in the final weekend, which would be January of 2025, I think, if I'm getting my years correct here, there'd be 1 day on campus. Now, for both programs, regardless if it's online or blended, there are also synchronous sessions. The thing that is interesting about this is because it's a hybrid model, we cannot require more than a certain amount of time on campus. And because our weekends are considered high impact residency weekends, you're looking at about 8 hours of coursework per day on those days. So that adds up over the course of a weekend to the equivalent of quite a few in-class hours, if you will. So that's why it's so much time is just on the weekends. Then when you're doing office hours, or a lot of the professors offer synchronous class session time, that's actually done via Zoom, regardless of if you're blended or online. So to answer your question, the required times are really in those little thought bubbles, because even those synchronous sessions that are online, those are recorded because kind of by CSU law, we can't require the online components to be synchronous for a hybrid program. Okay. So I hope I didn't confuse you. I probably did.
No, I
Okay.
got it. I guess
Okay.
my question too is those synchronous classes, those that are offered,
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
So, like most of us probably, I work full time.
Oh, okay,
Are those
sure.
offered in the daytime or at night or on weekends?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So regardless of program modality, those are voted upon by the student. And I can tell you my entire time as a student and working for the program, they've almost always been 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. PST.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
And then
Any other questions that you guys can think of?
Could I ask one more?
Please.
What's kind of the ratio on average of people that choose to do the hybrid kind of coming in at the beginning of those semesters, and
Yeah,
those who don't?
Okay, in terms of like the online versus blended total of students?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to answer your question in 2 ways, just because somebody asked a similar question who can't attend. Firstly, for your specific question, loosely speaking, it's usually about a 60-40 split. So about 60% of folks pick the hybrid model, and that's usually us folks who are here local to the Monterey area, the Peninsula area, or the Bay, or San Luis Obispo County. Those three counties are always most kind of accurately the folks who fit in terms of that model, and that's who we created it for. And then the other 40% are just folks from all over California, in some cases even international settings as well. The second part to your question, and this isn't necessarily directly to what you're asking me, but it is relevant to another student's question, which is looking at the ratio in terms of student expertise. And so about a third of our folks are K through 12 teachers, about a third of our folks work in higher education contexts, and then about a third work in nonprofit, for-profit, or corporate education or training environments. So it's a very, very diverse student group. And really, regardless, the background of the student very rarely dictates which of the two models they pick. It's almost always based on geographic location. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions that you guys might have? If not, I'm free to let you go on whatever you might have here. If not, we can shut it down for the evening. Okay, well, I'm going to assume then that we're good at this point. If there's any questions that you have, feel free to let me know by email or by phone. Otherwise, have a great evening.